And after all, when they asked Manet about why are the flannel trousers, why do they look somewhat distorted, the answer was, it's just paint. It is just paint. Exactly. It is just paint. We have time to follow up on some of today's discussion, so let me jump in let me try to pepper this. This week, opening at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City, is a major show regarding Warhol, 60 artists, 50 years. And let's assume that the Metropolitan Museum has obviously great influence over writing history. History is written by the winners, after all. Here's the cover of the current Art News, Warhol, the after effect, the Warhol effect, art after Andy. This is particularly important because we are in Warhol country here in Western Pennsylvania. So this is, I think, a good jumping off point. Mark Rosenthal, curator at the Metropolitan Museum, says Warhol created a topography, and in that topography there are new rivers that form, many things change to which people adapt. I'm coming to think that Warhol did change the world and that he had the greatest impact of any artist in the past 50 years. Warhol. It is realist art. They are soup cans and commercial products and Brillo boxes, but it is the world seen through a series of perhaps parody, cynical, and images that are more spoof and parody. So why, Henry, Jonathan, Gail, why does realism then become thinned out against the dominant imagery of commercial deadpan comedy? Okay, jump in.
Well, I just wanted to jump in because there's a really interesting thing about Hockney and Warhol and tracing from photographs, which is that, so Hockney begins talking about why he's obsessed with his belief that almost every great artist from the Renaissance on was somehow using some form of lens and device, right? And the reason he comes to that conclusion or comes to this insight is that he was at an Eng show and he was looking at these Eng drawings and he said, oh, these remind me of the line in Andy Warhol's tracings, because Warhol was an illustrator. He began as an illustrator in the 50s, and he did often beautiful drawings of nude men, but he would often trace them, do tracings and use different things. And he said, the line reminds me of the way, and then later he was always tracing, he was always doing drawings, tracing. And he said, the line reminds me of Andy Warhol's tracing line. So Eng must be also tracing from something, using some kind of tracing device. So it's interesting. And one of the things that Warhol does that's so brilliant as a success is to make the leap from being an illustrator in the 50s, very, very successful illustrator, the type of person who was so successful that he could buy art, and artists in those days didn't buy other artists' work, they traded, as somebody said. But Warhol was this incredibly successful illustrator, and then he moved over into the so-called high art world, the art world, by in fact taking a lot of the world of commercialism and advertising that he was making advertisements and then using that in his work. So it shows that one of the things that really brilliant artists can do sometimes is take an aspect of their work and really turn it on its head, you know. And so you have to sort of admire, or I don't know if you have to admire it, but it's smart, you know. And sometimes if you have lemons, you make lemonade kind of idea. And, you know, other artists, somehow they're not able to do it. And I agree, I certainly agree with Gail that there is no doubt. I mean, the stories go again and again and again. And even Georgia O'Keeffe, when about women artists, even when Georgia O'Keeffe was really first introduced to the New York art world and everything, people more likely knew that she was the model of Stieglitz and had been photographed by him, and that was the scandal. And she had to overcome that aspect of even her relationship with Stieglitz, you know, because she was known for those aspects. So it's difficult. It's, you know, it's an obstacle race, right?
Okay, but what about new painters talking about using realist imagery when so much of the commercial appropriated imagery is being recycled, and that seems to be what is dominating not only the art market, the art critical, but the art market in terms of pricing.
You know, I just want to go back for a second, but also to address that. Mark Rosenthal saying Andy Warhol is the most important artist in 50 years. Maybe he's a great father figure, but it's the granddaddy that really mattered, and that artist came out of commercial illustration into realism, and that artist was Edward Hopper. And I think he's much more influential than Warhol, but I think Warhol is the next generation of representation. And I mean, I have to say I'm uncomfortable with saying that American art is just about realism, because I think there is always that other pole, the sort of Hopper-Pollock duality, and I don't think it's going to go away, and I think Norman Rockwell really got it.
Henry, tell us how people who love Thomas Hart Benton and American regionalist art, and perhaps the other camp, people who love abstract avant-gardist art, how they should really almost interact in a yin-yang and create a reconciliation based on your book, Tom and Jack.
I'm sort of thinking of three ways to answer this question at once, so it's hard to know where to start. I can talk a little bit about Thomas Hart Benton and Jackson Pollock, because they're usually considered at opposite poles of American art. And some people are surprised that you could even write a book in which they're both characters, but Pollock's only teacher was Thomas Hart Benton, and basically one of the things that's not known about Benton so widely is that he went through an early phase as a modernist artist and painted pure abstractions in every decade of his career right up to the end of his life. For that matter, I think that one of the things we've started to realize about Jackson Pollock is that most of his paintings have some degree of figurative imagery. In fact, probably all of them do, though it would be sort of a laborious exercise to go through every painting and to figure out the ways in which it has figurative imagery. And I guess I'd say that increasingly this notion that there's abstraction and there's realist painting and that they're just at opposite poles is a position that just seems sort of philosophically naive, that it seems as though there's a continuum between the two positions.
Well,
and I was just going to, let me just say one other thing. I think that one of the things that Warhol did by reintroducing representational imagery, and also by doing all the things that artists weren't supposed to do, like using silk screens, tracing photographs, that kind of thing, is it made us look at realist painting more closely and think more carefully about how a realist painting is put together and what the choices are. And you know, I think we're entering an age where it seems as though there are a greater number of possibilities of what an artist can do.
Yeah. I think also one of the things, you know, when in my classes, I'm so down on the students actually even using the word realism. I much prefer the word illusionism, because already built into the word illusionism is an idea that there's something fictional, right? And you know, I know in many cases we're all in agreement on this, but I think, you know, if you were to have a Robert Bechtel painting in this room next to Colin Browning, and you would say to a student, you know, or not student, but anyone, you know, which is the more realistic? Well, they'd probably pick the Bechtel, but what do they really mean? That's the one that looks like a photograph. So, and photographs are very artificial. They, you know, first of all, they're often black and white. The world doesn't look like a photograph. And which photograph? I would say, but of course, there have been many movements that have embraced the term realism. And I would say that a realism, if I was going to really think about a really powerful realism, has to really question or put on display the process by which we come to think something is true or not true, something is real or not real. Often those kinds of painting, when they're first seen, don't look real to people. Impressionism, when it was first on the scene, seemed to look blurry and strange. Again and again, art that we take to be realistic now, when it was first shown, seemed very peculiar and weird and threw off what people thought was true and real. So I think that we have to be questioning. I think of the abstract expressionists, there was an argument to be made, and often it was made about the materiality of abstraction, in which the claim was made that abstract paintings are real because they are what they are. They don't pretend to be anything else but paintings, and they're made of pain. And the unreal pictures, and a lot of abstract expressionists would say that, the unreal pictures are the ones that make you want to think that they're windows into the world, etc., they're illusions. So it's all very fraught and tricky and anxious.
Colleen Browning said in one of her catalog statements, "I am an illusionist by nature." Let's focus on Colleen. We have some questions that people in the internet sent to us, and I'm actually going to converge two questions. One comes from Christy here in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, asking, can you speak about the discrepancy in Colleen Browning's age and place of birth as a personal issue, a social convention, a marketing ploy, or some other dynamic? It was discovered in the writing and in the research for this project that Colleen Browning, in every encyclopedia and in every source printed, published that she was born in 1929 when she was actually born in 1918. When Michael Struber and many of the people here at SEMA met her in 1998, they thought she was 11 years older. She died at age 83 when people thought that she was really 72. She was really 83. So Gail, I'd be very interested to hear women and this manipulation of age.
Well, it isn't just women, but certainly the pressure was greater for women, and especially if they were involved with a man who might be a couple of years younger. But the artist that I mentioned, Teresa Bernstein, she actually, her dealer sent out invitations for celebration of an exhibition for her 100th birthday, and she had scratched, I knew her then, she scratched out 100. She didn't want anyone to know. But, you know, there is ageism still in this society. I didn't believe it when I first started out, but I do now. And Lee Krasner was older by a few years, about 3, than Jackson Pollock, and she fudged her age at first. There's a moment when she says, "This is the first time I've published my real age." And I was talking to a poet who will have to go nameless, a friend of mine, a woman, and talking about writing something about her work, and she said, "I've never given my true age." So it's going on today. It's getting harder and harder with the internet to do these fibs. But it's not just women. Sometimes their partners are fully collaborative. But they do it with really good reasons. I knew one artist who, well into her 40s, was trying to break into the New York scene and was still wanting to be one of the younger artists. So the prejudices in the society, in the art world, have really encouraged this. Colleen Browning should be completely forgiven.
I might just say as a kind of footnote that one of the other major instances of this, however, is that Milton Avery lied about his age, and he did it because he didn't want his wife to know how much older he was than her. He wanted to seem younger than he was. So. Yeah.